It is my great honor to introduce my friend Lisa Lund to you. Lisa is a senior certified Gottman therapist and trainer and is on the Speakers Bureau at the Gottman Institute. She teaches all levels of Gottman professional training, leading to certification in the Gottman Method. Lisa holds an MS in counseling from San Francisco State University and is certified in rehabilitation counseling and specializes in family rehabilitation counseling. She has a private practice in Sebastopol, and Lisa learned to speak up because she was one of 8 children in her family, and I'm sure she's had a lot of practice early on in conflict resolution. So here we go.
It was survival of the fittest. So look, we did that. It's still 20 up. It was like no time at all. Good job. So I have a very ambitious program today. I've taken tapes from my level 1 training that I'm going to show you. So I have at least a half hour of film. So I want to give little bit of an apology ahead of time. If I do not get to a question, my email is on my handout, and also I will stay after the meeting. So if I don't get to you in the program, feel free to email me your questions or stop me after the meeting. So Gottman therapy really is a therapy that it's a psychology based on real couples, and is something that I very much appreciate about this approach, because we're not going to take any of our couples to couple nirvana. We're not looking at perfection. We're looking at the good enough relationship, because that's what they found in the research. They didn't find any perfect couples. Couples were not each other's soulmates all of the time, and they definitely were not attuned all of the time. And that makes a lot of sense if you think about it. I mean, think about in your own relationships. How often are you 100% available to hear your partner's needs, their concerns, their stressors? What would you say?
When I'm awake, or
when you're awake. Yeah, it's helpful to be awake. Yeah, we are just including, I'll give you that, just awake time. I mean, would you say 50% is a generous estimate, given our jobs and given everything else? So like kind of flipping an unbiased coin, okay, accessible to one another at the same time. So now we're flipping 2 coins, about 25% of the time. So we know that relationships are ripe for misattunement and for fights and for disagreements. It's part of what you get in close relationships. And we really need a way to repair, and we need a way to deal with those misattunements. What's different about Gottman couples therapy is that we're looking at conflict management. And today I'm just going to work on a small aspect of Gottman therapy, which is a piece in the conflict aspect. And you notice we say management, we don't say conflict resolution, because about 3/4 of the conflict that couples argue about, the problems, are perpetual problems. They don't go away, and that makes a lot of sense, right? Think about your relationships with your kids, with your parents, with your siblings. Those conflict areas are generally deeply based in our personality or core beliefs, values, and those things are pretty stable over a lifetime. And that's what they found with the couples. Now, that was true for the masters, and a master couple is a couple who is defined as they stay together and they're satisfied, they're happy together. They answer the question, would you come together with this person again, either marry them or partner with them? And the answer is yes. Through the ups and downs, yes, I would come choose them again. The disasters, and I'm sorry, I apologize for that term. It's not my term. I don't use that with my couples, even though it rolls so nicely, masters and disasters. I say the masters and then the couples who don't do as well. A disaster couple, though, is the couple that gets divorced, and that's not to say that divorce is a bad thing. But when you're looking at relationship, being successful, either they're getting divorced or they stay together but they're dissatisfied. And so those were the two categories. And Gottman asked two questions. He said, what makes a satisfying relationship and what predicts divorce? That's what they wanted to know. Now, not all conflict is the same. It's often existentially based. And this is an area where we're a little bit, we agree with, in Gottman therapy, with the attachment model of couples therapy. Sue Johnson and John Gottman are very good friends, and there's a lot of overlap. If you look at the handbook on couples therapy by Gottman, in the chapter on emotionally focused therapy, it's Gottman's work and Sue Johnson's work. So there's a lot of overlap there. The one difference is that in Gottman's work, we see that there are other existentially based reasons that couples might have conflict, that it's not just attachment. I can see my partner as an obstacle to something that is independently very important to me. So it's a little bit of a difference. When we're looking at conflict, we want to help couples move from the surface down to what that conflict means to them. What is the symbolic meaning of what they're talking about? So you'll have a couple come in and they've been arguing about the budget for 10 years. And I can tell you, I've met that couple. A lot of my couples are like that, or about the house, or about the kids, or about whatever. What are they really talking about? They're talking about what money means to them. And it has different meaning. And I'm talking about something that I feel my partner is not honoring. But we don't get to that because we argue about the budget instead. We want to help couples get to what are they really talking about here. And we build a skill set in couples, and that skill set is based on what couples in the research, and Gottman has done 40 years of research on couples, what were they doing differently? And so we're building a skill set that helps our couples be more like and interact and communicate more like those couples that were doing well in the research. So they're really not learning from Gottman. They're not learning from me. They're not learning from you. They're learning from those other couples who were brave enough to allow themselves to be researched in these longitudinal studies. And Gottman's done several of them. I'm not going to go deeply into the research in this talk, but I will say he was among the first to do observational studies of couples. So prior to that, a lot of times it was just filling out questionnaires, but the Gottmans actually studied couples and observed them and then followed up with them in increments of 3 to 4 years over 15, 20-year periods. And they looked at, could they find patterns that were predictive of a couple being a master couple or going in the other direction? And they did find patterns. Now today I'm going to talk about conflict, but it's very, very important that, we went ahead there. Okay, we're going to do this too, I know. Okay, but you saw earlier that we had the 3 circles, that Venn diagram of friendship, conflict, and shared meaning. And in this method, we don't just work on conflict. We think it's equally important to work on the couple's friendship and to work on their shared meaning. And we define shared meaning as supporting one another in their independent dreams and having a sense of what they didn't get together to learn how to resolve conflict. They got together to live a life together. And really helping them talk about what that is for them, what is meaningful for them, what are they about, and how do they enact that in their relationship. We help them focus on rituals of connection that honor what is important to them and have them talk about meaning in friendship and in conflict. And what I tell my couples when we do the workshop, day 1 is all friendship exercises. And really, they're all the skills that you also use in conflict. They're just a lot harder to do. It's very hard to ask an open-ended question when you're in conflict. Tell me what that means to you. Why is that so important? What is the story behind that? Very difficult. But really, those are the skills that you want them to be able to do in conflict. Fondness and admiration, a friendship component of the sound relationship house, which is Gottman's theory based on the research. In conflict, maybe that looks like respect. You know, maybe you're not feeling the love, but can we help you maintain respectful conversations? So today we're just going to take a little piece. Now this is a very important film that I show in my level 1, and I'm going to show it to you right now. Recognize those guys? So abuse is in a separate room, and I bet that feels familiar to some of you. All been there. Okay, let's look at a real couple. Now these are old films. They're like 30 years old. They're very grainy, and from the Gottman Love Lab. The couples are facing us, but they're actually facing each other. And they would code interactions like this. The researchers would code the couple, and they have like a little talk dial. And they're looking at things like, this couple is talking about a conflict. Does anybody make a repair? Is that repair accepted? Are they escalating or are they de-escalating? And what are they saying or doing that's creating that in their conversation? So when they did the research, they didn't know what they really were looking for. It was analyzing the tapes and following up with the couples, and then going back and saying, okay, this group of couples were not happy. Were there differences between them? This couple that we're looking at is actually a newlywed couple. Very interesting, because of the newlywed couple, 6 years later, many of them didn't make it, although they all said they were happy. They were newlyweds. But when they coded the tapes, they really could see differences. So look at this couple and see what you notice. And I want you to especially look at, it's just a couple of minutes, do either of them make any attempt to de-escalate the conversation? And is that accepted? Okay, so watch that for that. Did you catch that? He made yeah, I know, it's grainy tape. He said a very eloquent repair. He said, I guess it is that I don't remember the things that you remember, and you don't remember the things that I remember. So when you see that in your sessions, wow, that was an attempt to de-escalate. That was an attempt to repair. But she can't accept it. She just goes right back into defensiveness. That's a kind of a defensive back and forth. These are newlywed couple, right? How well do you think that's going to play over time? Not well. Yeah. So what is dysfunctional? What did they find was dysfunctional? One is more negativity than positivity in the relationship. Did you guys see Rick Hansen? He said we could steal his stuff. I'm going to steal that line. That negative interactions are like Velcro and positive interactions are like Teflon. They don't stay with us. And that really is true with couples as well. In fact, they found 4 types of couples. One was conflict avoidant. Couples who really don't like conflict and they avoid talking about it. They fight occasionally because if there's something wrong, they haven't processed it, builds up that negativity, and then they may have big fights. But for the most part, they avoid it. They found couples that were very validating. That couple that, in Olson's work in Prepare and Rich, is the harmonious couple, and they accentuate their similarities with one another. They're the validating couple. Traditionally, we thought of them as really the model that we should all aspire to. Then the third couple is that volatile couple. And they use a lot of persuasion when they argue. They're very strong people and they fight a lot. Okay? All 3 of them can do poorly. And all 3 of them can do well. The difference was the ratio of positive interactions to negative. And 0.8 to 1 is a divorce predictor. So about the same, negative to positive interactions doesn't cut it. You really need 5 to 1. Overwhelmingly, relationships need to be more positive environments. Now, in conflict, what that looks like is accepting influence more with your partner. It looks like when you have a fight and you go to the mat, you come back and you repair it. So we're not talking about being perfect, but this is an important concept. Yes? The fourth couple, thank you, would be a mismatched couple. And it's one of the, in other words, you've got somebody who's conflict avoidant with somebody who's validating, somebody, who really needs to accentuate the similarities, and the other is avoidant, or validating with volatile would be the other. You rarely, almost never find volatile with conflict avoidant. They just don't get together to begin with. So we call that a meta-emotion mismatch. Feelings about feelings. The expression, mostly. We all have the same set of feelings, but the expression of emotion. And it's one that neither of them is right or wrong, but we have to help them understand that what they need is very different. And it's perpetual and it's not going away. And they kind of both have to work to the edge of what their comfort level is, and they have to do a lot of repair. The Four Horsemen, and I know you guys have heard of the Four Horsemen, they get their own place there. Jeff did that. Wasn't personal, just my partner. That wasn't personal the way that came down in the, no, okay. Giving me a message about that. All right, so these are the Four Horsemen. Criticism, defensiveness, contempt, and stonewalling. They're not the only predictors of divorce, but they're the biggest ones. Why is that? Because they create gridlock. And it's very important when you have a complaint, conflict discussions come from somebody's been hurt, somebody needs change. There's something very important to somebody that they're trying to express to their partner. So they're trying to have a conversation about that, and they have a fight instead. And that's what we do. Any fight that a couple has can be analyzed in terms of the conversation they were trying to have. And when they come into your session and they've had a fight that week, if they haven't gotten back to it and processed it, that's what you want to do. You want to help them do that. It's one of the skills that you want to teach them. Now, none of these say the antidote is stifle yourself. So it really is about being more effective. Criticism, the antidote is to really make your complaint without blaming your partner. Use a more gentle startup. When you start a complaint with a criticism, which is you always, I can't believe you. All you have to do, the litmus test, is add to the sentence, what is wrong with you? If you can add to your sentence, what is wrong with you, you are in criticism. Defensiveness is to take some responsibility. So even if your partner is being critical, if you can say, hey, please don't criticize, but obviously something's important to you, or however you want to use the language. But anything that begets, this is our problem, it's going to help downregulate that negativity. Contempt, we want to really eliminate. Name calling, coming from a superior place. They really did not find much contempt at all in the masters. They found the other three, but they rarely found contempt. And so the antidote contempt is to be assertive, to state what you're feeling. Contempt oftentimes comes from an internal working model where there's a lot of self-contempt. And so when you're working with these couples and you see contempt, you want to start there. What kind of messages are they giving to themselves and also to their partner? I'm going to get to you, Gail. Stonewalling is really, can be a strategy. I'm not going to say anything, because if I say anything, it's going to make it worse. But it can also be, really any of these can also come from physiologically being elevated. Ideally, you want to teach your couples to have their arguments at resting heart rate, but really being flooded. And once they go into that escalated heart rate, which for most of us is above 100, they really aren't capable of being empathic at that moment. They're not really capable of taking in information, and they really do need to calm down. Did you have a question, Gail?
I was going to say that the worst thing about contempt lots of times is the tone of voice.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You can say a nice thing, but the tone of voice is just...
Mm-hmm. The Southerners are really good at that. Huh? She looks like a slut in that dress. God bless her. As long as they add God bless her or God love her, you can say anything, right? That's right. Okay, stonewalling. Does anybody recognize that? Men, by the way, 80% of stonewallers are men. Women can stonewall too, particularly women if they have trauma in their background. And women tend to be more verbal and tend to ride the horse of criticism. And guess how they go together? Not well. Not well. Because if I feel, and you know, one thing you do with this, when you put the heart rate monitors on, particularly in that dynamic, you got a heterosexual couple, and she's like all over the map with the criticism, and her heart monitor is going ba-boom, 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 but what's his doing? Like this. So I don't know, in lesbian relationships, maybe it's 100%. I don't know. I'm kidding. Hi, guys. Lesbian and gay couples also obviously have the four horsemen, and it does tend to run in gender lines in those groups as well. So lesbians tend to be much more verbal, and gay couples tend to really have to watch for that negativity. And this is interesting, just an aside, that helping men, particularly men, are much more vigilant to danger. And Hansen talked about that a little bit too. We were prey before we were predators. So it's kind of a Darwinian concept. I don't know if it plays out. But they did find that in the research. And you don't always see that. And so particularly emotionally intelligent men that are able to regulate that negativity is helpful to their partner, but it's also helpful to them because they take a lot longer to come back down. And you'll see that. I can remember it happens a lot, but one couple, 40 minutes for the guy to come back down to resting heart rate in session. Fortunately, I do 80-minute sessions, but it's interesting. So you really got to help them. The physiology of their relationship is very, very important. And you want to help them to know what to do. All of the four horsemen are really coming from, what are you going to do if there's a tiger in the room? You're going to fight, you're going to freeze, or you're going to run like hell. And that's what happens with your couples. They're under threat. Let's look at the four horsemen and see what these look like. So we want to put tools in their hands in terms of what to do when the four horsemen enter the scene. It's a part of what we do in Gottman therapy. And they will enter. I mean, I'm sure you've seen that in your practice, right? Some of those. And that's the best time to teach them. It's when it's actually happening. Yes?
I was thinking about stonewalling and how so often... Oh, thank you. How so often I like the idea of that the client is trying to self-regulate and calm down, soothe themselves. But it's so often taken by the partner as not caring. Mm-hmm. The perception of they don't care because they're not paying attention. Absolutely. When really they're just trying to calm down their nervous system. I really appreciate you bringing that. Yeah.
Right, and you can't take a lot of words in at that point. And so what you'll teach them is, first, great when it happens in your office. These are great things to happen in your office because that's the best time to teach them what to do. And you can put those heart monitors on and they can see picture worth 1,000 words. And then you want to give them a way to be able to calm down. And I'm actually going to show you a film clip of Julie working with a couple that we show in the level 1 where the wife gets flooded and she deals with that. She teaches them what to do in that moment. And she does it with them, really, to soothe. Okay. So what is dysfunctional? Continued. Emotional disengagement. Now this is kind of interesting because there are two peaks when couples who are married or partnered, committed relationship break up, and they studied, for this study was married couples. One is early on, at about 6 or 7 years. And those couples tend to be the real volatile couples, a lot of fighting, and they break up, right? The other peak is at about 16 years. And 16 years is generally emotional disengagement. So this used to really fool me because couples would come in occasionally and I think, what is the problem here? They're not fighting. They seem very polite with one another. Well, it's not enough for the absence of the four horsemen, or negativity, which you never get completely anyway. At least that shows some engagement. It's the absence of positive affect. And that leads to disengagement. And so sooner or later, there's what we call a CL alt, comparison level alternative, where they begin to think they can do better elsewhere, in another relationship or by themselves, and they begin to make negative comparisons, their partner, to an alternative world or alternative experience. And eventually that leads to leaving the relationship. And it's easy to miss. It's really easy to miss. So, kind of interesting there. So, failure of repair attempts. Again, we know they're going to mess up. We all mess up. I mess up. You guys mess up. It's about, can you repair? And can you teach them to repair? Now, just an aside, when the friendship's not in place, when that couple is not turning toward one another in their daily life and friendship, they're not talking about shared meaning, sometimes at all. Their life together is a big to-do list. And so they're disconnected to begin with. And then they have a fight about something. And they're seeing their partner as an obstacle to something that's very, very important to them. How do you think repairs do? Not well. Not well. Because they're not fighting with their friend. They're fighting with somebody they don't feel knows them. They don't feel respects them. Who is not turning toward them. In everyday conversations are interested in them. And now they're an obstacle to something that's important. And those repair attempts don't do well. That's negative sentiment override, what I just described. So, negative sentiment override, I like to think of as the Roach Hotel. And it's it's very easy for those distressed couples to step into negativity. It happens just like that because they're so reactive. Or to step into disengagement, whether it's the fight, flight, or freeze. And very, very difficult to step out. They don't know how to repair it. They don't know how to turn toward one another in conflict. So other couples, your master couples are going to fight too. But they don't fight as often, and they can get themselves out of it. And that's the difference. Negativity is an absorbing state. There's too much of it. The physiological arousal, I told you. For most of us, over 100, we're flooded. We just need to take a break and calm down. And when they were doing the research, they said, something's wrong with this camera. And they would just read magazines. It doesn't help to take a break if you're entertaining a lot of distress-maintaining kinds of thoughts. So you do, self-soothing. You want to teach them ways to really self-soothe. Because if you spend that half hour thinking about how awful it is and how awful your partner is, probably not going to calm down. But I'm going to show you a film clip of Julie doing it. So I won't use that time now. We'll actually see her doing it. If they're in really good shape, it's going to be lower. So a good way to do that is just to have them take, their pulse. I always have my pulse monitors right there. Beautiful one in your iPhone too, called Heart Rate, that's free. I have them do it when they're calmer, if I have a volatile couple, and then I have it put them on again when they're arguing. And you can have them beep, which can be helpful too. Remember when I put that one on you, honey? Yeah. I subject him to everything. We used to have these, when we were remodeling the house, we'd have these big fights about it, and then I got the idea about the pulse oximeter, and I'm like, honey, come on, let's put these pulse oximeters on and talk about the remodel. And it was really enlightening. I don't think I got 2 words out. This really pathetic little beep, 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 beep. Jesus, I'm giving you a heart attack. It was like, really, immediately, oh my God, I'm doing this to, and I was fine. I thought I was just talking, with italics. I had no idea. Okay, failure to accept influence. Now that's an interesting one. Okay, guys, this isn't to in any way malign you, but it's significant for both men and women to be able to accept influence. It was only predictive for men because women were already accepting influence at a high rate in the research. So men had a harder time accepting influence in heterosexual relationships from their partners. Kind of interesting. I don't always share that. I just say it's important for both of you. Fred, you know. All these gender things, you know, hey, they can go either way. You could take them with a grain of salt, but it is true. Okay. When we're working with couples, and I just chose 4. Yeah, it's a short talk, but 4 the main assumptions. Therapy in Gottman approach is all about preventing relapse. And for that reason, we want to put the skills in the couple system. And we move from a triadic to a dyadic model with them and act as a coach. And what that means is that more often than not, I'm going to say, tell him, tell her, or gay lesbian, tell her, tell her. I'm going to get them talking to each other. And I'm going to give them tools that they can use in the office. And if they don't need me, I'm going to sit back. But if the 4 horsemen enter on the scene, or they're not able to do the intervention, then I'm going to move in and be much more triadic with them. And I picked out 2 films, and in one of them you're going to see Julie more sitting back, and in the other you're going to see her being more active. Just kind of to give you a little bit of a sense of what happens there, although it can happen in many different ways. Emotion is central. I think a lot of times people have a misconception that Gottman work is just about, psychoeducational. It is. We believe that we want to give them the skills. We don't believe it's enough. We don't believe that a couple has secure attachment and they're automatically going to play together and learn together and, know how to do all those things. But emotion is central, and we do work with the emotions. Gottman therapy happens in the context of good, solid therapy, and it's an integrative model, and we will blend in. Depends on anything that's consistent with these assumptions. I'm also trained in emotionally focused couples therapy. We blend in a lot of Dan Weil's work, collaborative couples therapy. We would not blend in something that like extended family systems that really is much more honed on differentiation and separation, because thanks to Sue Johnson's work, we see that dependency in relationships is healthy. State-dependent learning, the best time to teach somebody something is when they're in that emotional state. So this whole idea of, speaking of Murray Bowen and extended family systems, of you need to calm somebody down to give them information. Well, if they're flooded, yes. But it's important to differentiate between I'm flooded, I'm physiologically aroused, and I can't take in information, to I'm really upset and I'm really angry. That's a different state, and that's okay, because anger doesn't predict anything. It doesn't need to be delegated to a secondary emotion. It's an approach emotion. It helps us understand that our toes have been stepped on, and if your couples get angry in session, let them get angry. Now, when they slip into escalating, then that's when you want to intervene. So all of the emotions, anger says there's an obstacle to something I need here, and you are that obstacle. If I'm sad, I'm experiencing a loss. What is that loss? It's all this information in these kind of darker side of the spectrum of emotion. If I'm afraid, what do I need right now to feel safer? And in relationship, you get all those emotions, and you want to teach them to work with all of them.
Just to clarify with state dependent, so basically it's like you're saying it's experiential.
Yeah.
It's happening here and now.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's the best time. It's really, I can tell them about the 4 horsemen, and I do. It's part of the assessment. But the best time for them to learn what to do is when it's happening in the room. And so we want that emotion to come into the room. And then we want to teach them what to do when it happens. Unless they're getting flooded. And even when they get flooded, then we're going to teach them what to do when they get flooded. Okay, and you can't always tell just by looking at somebody. You really do need to take their heart rate and teach them to do it themselves. Under your finger, 2 fingers, come down about 2 inches, push in, you feel your pulse rate, and use your second hand to 15 times 4.
What does BPA stand
diffuse physiological arousal. And that's from Henry's model of stress. It's really a Gottman term, diffuse physiological arousal. It's only relationships can produce that state of feeling extremely helpless and aggressive at the same time. So you may want to run and you may want to fight. And that's what they mean by that. Okay. So I'm going to show you this is a very seemingly simple intervention. It's called the Rappaport intervention. And John Gottman is a mathematician, and he's very much influenced. You think other psychologists, will cite Freud or Jung, or Gottman likes mathematicians and game theory. And Rappaport worked in international conflict, really helping with treaties around nuclear disarmament. And so he took some of his principles to do this. Really, it's very similar to an active listening exercise, but you put controls on the speaker and on the listener. And the reflecting is much more macro than reflecting, sentence by sentence. And so you're having them postpone persuasion. And if I can give you a tip, when your couples are working with a conflict or a disagreement or anything else like that that creates animosity between them, don't let them go to problem solving until they really understand each other's point of view. Unless it's about where they go to dinner that night and there's no hidden agenda, but most of the time there is. So we'll spend like a whole session, maybe many sessions, of trying to understand something before we have any problem solving about it. And Rappaport would do that too. He would say both groups needed to be able to state their partner's position to their satisfaction, with empathy and validation. Validation doesn't mean I agree necessarily with everything, but, I understand it before they began to negotiate. So this couple, and the speaker, they also take notes. I've always got my notepads there. And they don't have to, but we really encourage them to take notes when their partner's talking, and so that they can capture what they're saying. They can reflect it back and then also validate. So this exercise with Paul and Chantel, and just briefly, this is a young couple that got together as teenagers. He was dealt in drugs and was shot 5 times, which created a whole conversion experience for him. And not dealing drugs now, kind of coming back, really recognizing the importance of the family. This couple is really tight, but they're also in a lot of trouble. So it's a couple from my level 1 training, and you're going to see her doing the Rappaport with them and putting the skills in their system. And it's going to be a little contrived in the beginning, but they do take it on. So let's watch this film. And this is Julie Gottman who's doing this session.